Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Before we get to the interview, let me introduce our special guest. Dr. Charmaine Rose has diverse expertise in human resources, organizational management, and marketing, showcasing her commitment to personal and professional growth. Her journey is a great testament to dedication and continual learning, as she is highly accomplished with 2 PhDs and multiple certifications with the Society of Human Resources, Emotional Quotient, and Project Management. With over 17 years of university teaching experience, her accomplishments and dedication speaks to her passion for education, emotional intelligence, and shaping the future with her students. So I always start my questions off with, why are you so passionate, or what made you passionate about emotional intelligence?
All right, so as a single mom, I have 2 kids. So when they were growing up, I was so busy working, right? And I guess I wasn't regulating my emotions. So one time I went to the bank, and the gentleman goes, "Oh, we're in a good mood today." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" I say, "I'm never in a good mood when I get here." He goes, "No." So that kind of threw me back, right?
Yeah.
Because again, I wasn't regulating my emotion. I didn't even know. And then a couple days after that, I walked in and my daughter goes, "Mom looks angry." He goes, "No, she always looks like that."
Oh, wow.
I think that was the nail in the coffin. I'm like, what's going on?
Made you wake up a little bit?
Yes, because we're so accustomed to going on like auto drive. We're kind of like a Tesla, right? We're just driving, you know, without, for me, I had places to go. I had work to do. I was working 3 jobs. I was going to school. I was raising my kids. I wasn't regulating my emotion. I wasn't taking time for me.
So your brain was just on auto mode. Like, I got to do this. I got to go to the bank and do this.
Absolutely. And I didn't realize I was literally angry all the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I was angry that I had to go to work. I was angry that I had to come home, do this. I was just angry. So when my son said that, I was like, whoa, something is wrong here. My 5-year-old shouldn't be telling me I always look like that. I'm always angry.
Wow, 5 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that was kind of your wake-up call to say, maybe I should be more mindful and self-aware.
Very mindful.
Okay.
Because, and then when the bank teller told me that, I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize. Because we have emotions, but we sometimes, I'm sorry, we just go on such auto mode for everything.
Right.
Things will trigger us, we get angry, we don't know why we're angry, but we get angry.
How would you say you've seen yourself transition from that wake-up call?
I started researching, I found the Society of Emotional Intelligence.
Oh, okay.
So I started reading up on it, and I says, this sounds interesting. This sounds like it's something that will help me, one, understand my emotion and be aware of my emotions so that I'm not affecting others, especially not in a negative way, especially my kids. Because again, it was more about my son. Saying, God, I've been doing this and doing it in such a bad way, because then I started thinking, oh, I'm a bad mom, the whole aspect of it, because he says, I'm always angry. And I'm like, I'm technically not angry. I might have been frustrated because I was working so many hours, I was tired, all this stuff that was going on, but I wasn't aware of it. That was my big point. I was never aware of it. So I went through Society of Emotional Intelligence, I did the test. Some of the things I was really heavy on, I was very heavy on empathy, but emotional regulation and all that stuff, I was terrible at it. Once I realized, wow, I need to start managing my emotions. I need to start regulating my emotion because it's affecting my children. It's affecting people I'm around. Subconsciously, I did not know that.
Does it, at the start, did it take a lot of energy and concentration to constantly feel like you had to change almost your attitude, your personality, your mood?
I wouldn't say energy. It takes more being present, if that makes sense. Being present in the moment. Being present when somebody's talking to me and not be thinking 50 million things and getting upset about the things in my head, and then it's outpouring to the person I'm talking to or the situation that I'm in. So it was about being present. So once I was present, I was like, okay, this person is talking to me. Why am I getting angry? This has nothing to do with me. What outcome do I want? So I'm talking in my head about how I should respond to get a positive outcome for everything. So I became more present. I wasn't, dealing subconsciously and just saying things and just walking away, not realizing how it's affecting the person I'm talking to and how I'm coming off.
How important would you say empathy is for someone to learn how to be emotionally intelligent?
Empathy is at the heart of emotional intelligence, right? Because without empathy, it's hard for you to understand, one, where the other person is coming from, so you're able to engage with them and build a relationship, right? So, but again, like everything else, there's too much of anything can be bad for you, right? So I realized I was too empathetic or I was not. So I really didn't have that little,
that balance between
right? And when I started teaching, I was so empathetic. The students come and give me the sob story, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," and then I allow them to get away with a ton of stuff.
Oh yeah.
So I had to learn, and the CEO for emotional intelligence said you have to regulate it, be aware of it, but still build boundaries, right? So when they tell me something, I'm so sorry to hear that. But your paper is due, I'll give you an extra 2 or 3 days. So I had to build boundaries around that. I had to build boundaries around that with my family. I had to build boundaries in my relationships because being too empathetic, again, people take advantage of you.
That's true. It can be very draining. And
it
you always
also is very draining.
Yeah, you always hear people say things like, oh, I go above and beyond to help this person, and I feel like I just don't have enough time for me and doing things that I want. And it's that balance that a lot of people struggle with because people with really big hearts, really kind hearts are always trying to say, hey, I understand what you're going through, I've been there, or I may not really fully understand what you're going through, but I see that you need help and I want to lend a helping hand. And then they realize they get themselves in this whole world of responsibility that they didn't ask for. So what advice, and maybe from your experience, would you give someone who is in that position, who's trying to find that balance of how can I be empathetic to help you, but at the same time, not have it be a cost to my mental health?
Right, and I think, again, that's where the self-awareness comes in. Be aware, what your boundaries are. Be aware how far you can go with the empathy that it doesn't harm you. If we're, like I said, we so subconsciously sometimes just go through the day and, being empathetic, it can be so draining because you're giving so much. So being present, be aware, and saying, hey, am I going to go this far and help her and then I'm gonna suffer? I have to be aware that, hey, I can be empathetic and not ruin the relationship, but I also have to be empathetic to the point where I can keep that relationship but not damage my psyche or my mental health. Right?
Would it be in some cases healthier for someone to, at best, say, I'm sorry, I just can't help? Or maybe there's nothing I can do?
There are times you have to do that, especially for your psyche, especially for your mental health, right? You have to say, I'm sorry to hear that, but unfortunately, I'm not able to. Remember that boundary I talk about? Sometimes, if and then coming away from emotional intelligence, sometimes, as an introvert, because I am an introvert and an empath, so I tend to pull a lot of that energy from other people. So I have to learn that, hey, if I go down that rabbit hole, I'm gonna do more harm to me than I am helping that person. So sometimes I have to build those boundaries and says, no, I'm not gonna go down there, and say no. No is never negative or bad. No is also helping you with your mental issues and making sure that you're building a balance. Right?
And I'm so glad you said that, because I think one of the biggest troubles that people have with saying no is they feel a bit of guilt to say, oh, I don't want to sound like a jerk, like I'm just blowing you off, but sometimes it's better to say no, because sometimes trying to help that person can make that person's situation worse, because to help people, it takes a bit of knowledge and competence to help people.
Not only that, you sometimes are not helping them, you're enabling them.
Oh,
So you also
yeah.
have to know the difference. And you know, that's something, you know, my daughter's struggling with, is saying that no. Because she, you know, again, she says, Mom, but they're probably going to hate me. And I says, no, they're not going to hate you. I says, but you're going to go down a rabbit hole where your psyche is going to suffer more in trying to help somebody that probably could help themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or find somebody who's more capable or able to help them. You know, so sometimes no is something good, not just for them, but for you. Right?
That's very important.
And that's what she's starting to learn, to build those boundaries. And I think most people are afraid of saying no because they're afraid of ruining a relationship. They're afraid of how people are going to perceive them, especially the younger generation, right? How are they going to perceive me? You know, are they going to think I'm a jerk? You know, are they going to think that, you know, I'm not a good friend? Are they going to think that, you know, and it's not about that.
Sometimes the other side, it requires a bit of empathy on their end too,
Yes.
even when they're in need of help.
Absolutely.
It's like some people are genuine when they understand that if you say no, it doesn't mean you're a bad person.
Yes.
They can understand and sympathize with
Yes.
that. But then it almost seems like sometimes people just want to make you feel guilty because they're trying to get something from you. And I think that's a very critical determining factor on whether or not I think someone's being genuine when
That's
they're
right.
asking for help.
Yeah.
And I've been in those situations where I've had people come up and ask me for help. Like, for example, I had a homeless guy come ask me, you know, for if I could buy him food. And when I went to go buy him food, he started telling me how he has 2 daughters who are athletes and they need to eat a lot. So he's like, I need to order more. And I'm like, I was like, I wasn't trying to, you know, purchase the whole place for you, you know?
Right.
So I was like, if you have daughters, I was like, I can get them a meal too, but I was like, you're limited on what you can get, you know? I'm not about to spend $100 because I just don't
Right.
have that, you know? And I think that's a real case when people try to gauge the trustworthiness and the
Right.
genuineness of someone who really needs help is if they can empathize in
Right.
return, you know? And that's so important for not taking advantage of someone's generosity or someone's, you know, help.
And you have to realize in yourself, where does my empathy stop? Right? Where do I stop being empathetic and, you know, understand that this is not helping that person? Because in helping that person, you can be an enabler, right? And it's not about enabling, but you want to make sure that if I'm being empathetic and I'm giving them help, it's something that's going to last them for time, not just the moment.
Yeah.
Right? Because then if you're doing it and then you see him again the next day and he wants more food again, you're just basically enabling his behavior. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know, it's like an addict in essence, right? When an addict comes and you're trying to get them off the stuff, but they says, "Oh, this is the last time. I promise you, I'm going to, you know, do good." And you say, "Okay," and you know, you're empathetic. You see what they're going through. You understand where they've been, and you're giving them money. You're not helping them. You're enabling them.
Yeah.
But if you say to them, "Listen, how about we, you know, go to the clinic?
Yeah.
They have food there. They can help you there." You know, and in the case of the homeless man, there are a lot of places around Tampa Bay going to the church, I call it mission something, Metropolitan Missionary. You know, how about we go down, you know, we go down there and get you food for both you and your children. You know, so sometimes you have to learn that if I keep giving this to him, everybody's going to come and keep giving it to him. He's never going to learn. We're just enabling that behavior.
Yeah, yeah. And
Right?
I think that's a great point that you brought up, because at the end of the day, people are like, I don't know how to help you, so I can help you for this instant.
Right.
But then what are they going to do the next day?
Right.
You know, they're just going to go and beg someone else for something.
Yeah.
It's like you're not really setting them up to you know, be independent and find
Right.
their own way. You're kind of setting them up to keep begging and asking people
You're
for help.
enabling them,
Yeah, you're enabling.
you know.
What advice would you give people who want to build and work on their emotional intelligence, what are some practical things they can do on a daily basis to try and improve their emotional intelligence?
I think especially in today's society, we're so focused on our phone, we're so focused on what everything is happening around us, we don't focus on us. We don't focus on ourselves, if that makes sense. We're so focused on everything else. We're not present. We want to capture the moment on a phone. You know, I've gone to concerts or whatever, and everybody's like this, right?
Yeah.
Nobody is present.
Yeah.
And I think when we put the phone down and we are present in the moment and start focusing, how am I feeling? You know, is this something I want to continue to do? Is this enjoyment if I'm at a concert? Am I enjoying the moment? You know, I volunteer at the Straz, and it's amazing to see some of these great shows come through, and everybody's sitting in the crowd like this. They're not even watching the show.
Yeah. They're watching through their phone,
Yeah.
and it's always funny because people always say the picture never does it justice. They're like,
It
you
doesn't.
had to be there.
It
But it's
doesn't,
like,
yeah.
when you are there, you're looking through the phone.
And you're enjoying the actual moment.
Yeah.
There, you know, and I think if you want to start with it, first be present. Be present for you. Be aware you're going through the day. When you wake up in the morning, first thing you say, how do I feel today? Is this is going to be a great day? Right? Zig Ziglar said one day he was doing a seminar, and this lady came up and says, oh, I hate my boss, I hate my job, I hate this, I hate that. Can you help me with this? So he said, every time you get up, he says, I want you to go to the mirror, look at it and says, I love my job. I love that I get to go to work today. I love my life. Say to that affirmation, right? He said he saw her a few months later, and she came up and says, oh my gosh, thank you so much. She says, now the people at work are not jerks anymore.
So it has a lot to do with perspective.
Right?
Yeah.
And because she wasn't present, she was so focused on everybody else, she was never focusing on herself.
Yeah.
And being aware of how she was feeling. And I think what she was feeling, she was projecting onto everyone else. Right?
And that's why everyone may seem like a jerk. In reaction.
Right. And the fact that she wasn't saying, wow, I love my job, I love myself. And then when she go to work, you know, she's in a better mood, right? Those affirmations help a lot being present in the moment for yourself, right? So she goes, hello everyone, and she's just being present. And I learned that. I learned to be present. When I walk into the room, you know, it's good morning, hello, how's everybody doing? Because I want to be present.
Yeah.
And then I see people walk in and you say good morning, and they're just like, and just walk by you.
Yeah.
Because they're not there. They're here, but they're not here.
And I think a lot of times, I like how you keep bringing up, you got to be present, because a lot of people being on their phone, their mind is not focused on being present because they want to save and capture that moment for a future time to show someone, whether posting on social media. There are genuine times where people want to capture a beautiful moment, maybe with their kids or whatever. I understand that. But their mind is focused on a future time of revisiting that moment. Being captured.
And they're not present. And then, you know, when you're talking about kids too, kids notice that, especially today. My nieces are 9 and 5. And every time their mom pick up their phone, they're like, Mom, we're right here. Because she loves to take pictures of the kids. They understand that. But sometimes it comes too much where you're not present. Right? And she's not present with the kids. She's like, Mom, could you put the phone down? Let's go to the park. Right? Because she's not present. Because she's so busy focused on taking those pictures that she's not present to enjoy the actual moment. And I think we need to.
Do you think in many ways kids are naturally more emotionally intelligent than adults?
Absolutely. They're also the best psychologists ever. Right? They know how to manipulate from birth. If I cry, Mom comes, change my Pampers. If I cry, Mom feeds me. Right? They know how to manipulate. So they're very good at regulating their emotions when they're little. Right? So they know if I cry, right, that brings somebody come running. Right? I remember my daughter was little and she used to cry. I used to go, run going. And then one day I says, you know what? she's manipulating me. So when she cried, I didn't run. After a while, she stopped. She's like, okay, that's not working anymore.
She figured it out.
Yeah, she figured it out, right? But yes, I think kids are, very emotional intelligent. I think as adults, we stop them from being emotionally intelligent as they grow up. Why are you crying? Stop crying, right? These are emotions that we have to show. They're not negative, but you're taught as a young age that crying is bad, right? Showing anger is bad, right? We never say, do it and then get out of your system now. Let's move on from that.
Now, emotional expression is healthy. What advice would you give someone who's trying to control their emotions? Because it's healthy to manage and control your emotions too. And at the same time, expressing your emotions. Because if you're angry, there's a lot of times where controlling it, and people sometimes get it confused with controlling and suppressing.
Yes.
Some people are like, well, if you want me to control my anger, you're pretty much telling me to just not have it or not express it. And it's like, well, how can we actually balance expression and managing it without trying to feel like we have to suppress it, if that's what managing it means?
Yeah. So, all right, managing your anger, right? If you're angry, it's good to express it, but not in a negative way. I can express, I am angry. I don't like this. This is not what I signed up for, right? But it's not screaming and yelling and, what are you doing? Yeah. So when
it's a healthy form of expression.
Right. It's a healthy form of expression. It's about saying, what do I want to achieve, right? I want to let them know I'm angry, but I also want to resolve the problem that's causing me to be angry. And we're seeing a lot of that mental thing happen now. People are so angry, they don't know how to control it. The road rage, I see one where a lady jump up on top of somebody's car, hitting her windshield because she's angry.
Yeah.
It's okay to be angry. There's nothing wrong with being angry. How you express it and what outcome you want is what you need to think about, right? I can tell you, I'm extremely angry, right? When my son was little, I says, don't bounce the ball, bounce the ball in the house. You might break something. He kept doing it, and he broke a bunch of stuff in my chest cabinet. So now this is when I started emotional intelligence. So I didn't get angry. Instead, I looked at him. I says, now do you see why I said not to bounce the ball in the house? He says, yes, Mom. I said, now go to your room and think about what you did, right? And figure out whether or not you're going to listen to me or do it again, right? And then when he came back out, he says, Mom, I'm sorry. I'll listen to you next time, right?
It almost seems like a lot of management comes from intellectually understanding what you're feeling and, like you said, where you want to go with that feeling.
Yes.
Are you just trying to get angry and let someone know you're angry and hope that they react in the way you want them to react? Oftentimes people get angry and they react back, and then that creates a combusting situation, right? But no, I like how you mentioned you have to understand what your goal in mind is.
Yes. What do I want to accomplish? Because that's the whole purpose of it, right? I'm angry. It's an emotion. Yes. It's not bad. It's how we react to it. That's bad, our actions. So, what do I want to accomplish, right? And for my son, I want to accomplish for him to understand why I said certain things and why he shouldn't have done it. Right. Now, if I'd spank him and, yell and scream at him, he probably wouldn't have learned anything, right? All he saw was me getting angry.
Right.
There was no lessons in it for him. I was just spanking him, whatever. But I was angry, yes, because I had some china in there, china glasses and stuff my mom gave me and stuff. But in retrospect, I looked and I kept saying it's things, but I shouldn't get angry at him. This is he's a kid. He's small, right? He's got to learn in some way.
Now, I do want to ask your thoughts about this because you're more knowledgeable than most people. When it comes to like spanking children, which is a very big debate, my parents spanked me and everything. I mean, we love our parents, a lot of people say sometimes spanking is good, sometimes spanking is not good. Sometimes people say it can be healthy and effective, and sometimes it's not. What are your thoughts on that?
All right, in my perspective, right? Everything, there's always a limit to certain things.
Right.
If you're raising children and you're raising them correctly, you probably only have to spank them once.
Right.
And I'm talking when they're little, you tap them on the butt and says, don't do that again.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're going to let them get away with it when they're little and then they become teenagers and you're trying to spank them, now it's going to be even more anger that's been building up that now you're taking out frustration on a child. Right?
I see.
So again, I think, yes, there is abuse because sometimes people don't know how to control their anger, right?
Right.
And it becomes action. And action, sometimes it's not just about the incident that's happening. Now, remember, with emotional intelligence is about being aware, to be angry at the right time, at the right person, for the right reason, right? Sometimes we're angry not at the right time and not at the right person, and we're taking that frustration out on the child. It could have been something that happened, several days ago that we've been holding on up here, and the child did one thing and it just explode, and you're taking it all out on the child.
Right.
So there is abuse. Right? But I think when they're little, if you're correcting them, to the point by the time they reach 10 years old, because child psychology said, right, from birth till 10, their personalities form, and they should know right from wrong. And I see people don't correct their kids, 5, 6 year old, and they go, oh, it's cute. It's not cute. Because it's not going to be cute when they do it when they get older, because now you're going to want to Punish them.
And they reinforce that behavior.
And you reinforce
when
the
they
behavior.
Say it's cute and they
Absolutely.
laugh.
Absolutely.
No, that's a very good point, because I think a lot of times, I do think sometimes parents spank out of anger and frustration. Because as teachers, we know teaching can be very exhausting. We know teaching can be very difficult. Yeah. And I think a lot of people may not have the patience to teach like professionals do, and their direct reaction is spank and let them learn.
Yes.
Let the pain teach them. And it's like, well, there's a difference between frustration and anger and hitting, because that becomes abuse, because intention does play a factor. But when you're doing it for disciplinary reasons, it might not be like, I'm angry at you, I'm not angry at you, but maybe I want you to be more mindful in being able to control yourself. And if you can't do that, and my words aren't getting through to you, maybe a smack on the butt will teach you. Because I do remember, I love my parents, they're wonderful parents, and I do remember one time I was being a complete, trouble child, okay? And my parents tell me all the time, hey, don't do this, don't do that. And I was just a little kid. And I understood what they were saying. I think that's a big fallacy that a lot of people don't understand. They think kids don't understand.
Oh, they do.
They do. They might not understand extremely complicated things, but they understand basic things. Don't do this, don't do that, right? But when you can kind of get away with it, kids also have that tendency to stretch. What can I get away with?
They're great psychologists.
Yeah. And then parents sometimes tells you, here's your limit. And in order for you to understand your limit and believe them, it does take a bit of spanking, because then you realize, wow, I really made mom and dad mad. And as you get older, I look back and I'm like, you know what? I probably did
earn it. Yeah. But and that's that. Like I said, that's the point. Yes, you can spank a child, but spank them for something they did right then and there. Not let something build to the point of frustration, and then you're so angry you can't see. And you're abusing the child. And I think that's where a lot of people fall when it comes to abuse of children, that frustration and that anger for their life, anger about something happened at work, it just comes out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, particularly like a lot of immigrants, their parents are pretty old school. So there's a lot of spanking that goes on. And I think when you look at a lot of these immigrants, they have strong family values. They take care of their parents. They respect their parents. And a lot of people say, oh, well, how can we get our kids to respect us and treat us and care about us in the same way as maybe those kids treat their parents? And it's not necessarily spanking, but it's more or less the education that comes with that spanking.
That's right.
We understood that our parents loved us.
Absolutely.
And when they spanked us, it was not abusive. When they spanked us, it was because we deserved it. We had to learn our lesson, and we respected that.
Yep.
It wasn't. I think a lot of people get the wrong idea when it comes to spanking as you make your kids fearful.
No.
Well, you don't make your kids fearful of you. Like, I never feared my parents.
Me either.
Yeah, I was never afraid of my mom or dad.
And I was spanked.
I understood that when they spanked me, it was because I had to learn a lesson, and words were not doing the trick.
But here what it did too, it made us mindful.
Yes, exactly.
It made us mindful. So if I'm going to do something, I become present at that moment and goes, well,
yes.
if I do this, my mom is probably going to hit me.
Yes.
This is wrong, and I won't do it.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So it made us mindful. So it was, to me, it was never
brought us
negative.
right to that present moment.
Right to that present moment.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that, because I never grew up thinking that my parents were abusive or my parents didn't love me. There is a healthy way of disciplining with spanking, and I think a lot of people get the wrong idea of spanking.
I think so. And like I say, when we look at spanking, people are spanking with frustration.
Yes.
Right? It's not so much to correct a behavior. It's more out of anger and frustration. Mm-hmm. Like I said, when they're little and you tap them on the butt and says, don't do that, you start them understanding, that behavior is unacceptable, right? And you can't wait till they get older to say, don't do that.
Yeah.
When they've been doing it all the time.
It's harder to change because they've been doing it all that time. And also, when you get older, you become a little bit more independently minded.
Yes.
And you start thinking in ways that you start to, as teenagers, you kind of hit a period in your life where you start to disagree with your parents a lot. And it gets a lot harder to discipline during adolescence.
Yeah, but even at adolescent, I think we're still mindful of what right and wrong was because we were taught it as a child.
Yes.
Because I know when I was 13, I know what was acceptable to my parents, right? And even when I got into 16, 17, I'm like, oh, my mom would not want me to do that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So we become so mindful of it. We still might not be under their thumb or fear them in that sense, but we know what their expectations of us are.
Exactly. It's almost like a disappointment. I don't want to disappoint my parents.
Yeah.
And it's like they have that standard because they care about me.
Yeah.
They care about me. They have that standard, and if I don't live up to that standard, it's not necessarily that they won't love me. It's that they almost feel. I almost feel as if I know I'm capable, and I'm letting them down. And I do think that that's in a way, I do think that's healthy because it teaches you to live up to certain standards.
Yes.
And one reason why people tend to like hang out with their friends a lot is because with your friends you don't have any standards. With your friends you're just goofing around, doing whatever you want. You're just having fun, right?
Yep.
But when you're around your parents, you can have fun and be yourself, but at the same time, your parents raised you.
You know what the standards are.
Yeah, to be up to the standards. Don't be a goofball. Don't be going out there making trouble. Don't be doing this. But when you're with your friends, there aren't no standards. Let's just have fun, whatever cost that may be.
Yeah, but you still have that boundary where you're going like, I don't know, my mom wouldn't want me to do that. It's funny, when my daughter went to college, I'd send her money, once a month. I says, hey, food, so she'd always spend it off before the end of the month, right? And then says, Mom, I need more money. So I kept sending it. And then one day I says, I'm enabling that behavior. So I said to her, listen, make this last for the month, right? If not, you're going to starve the rest of the month. So then one time she called me, she goes, Mom, I need more money. I says, no. I says, you're going to have to figure out what you're going to eat for the rest of the time. I says, I gave you enough money to last you the month, and you squander it off on, she loved to go shopping, buy clothes and stuff, right? So
that's the boundary for no.
Right, that's my boundary, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want her to starve your parent, but I'm like, that was my boundary. So the first month she struggled, her roommates in college helped her out. So the next month I sent her money. And then the end of the month, she goes, Mom, you'll be so proud of me. I says, why? She goes, I went to the store and I say, shoes or food, shoes or food. I chose food, right? So that was the lessons she had to learn. And again, like I said, as a parent, you're like, oh my God, she's going to starve to death, all that stuff. You start panicking.
Yeah.
But, I said, that's my no. That was my boundary for her. So, she started, she learned how budgeting
to and manage
her money. So now she stopped buying all the clothes and stuff. She says, well, I have to figure out what my priorities are.
And that's the thing is, she still loves you. She still calls you. And she doesn't see it as, my mom didn't care.
Yeah.
My mom was being neglectful.
Yeah.
She didn't she didn't see it as that. She said, Mom, you would be proud of me because that standard of making this money last, hey, I am maturing, I am being more responsible, and that's healthy.
And I made it.
That's good. Yeah.
And I made it.
And I think a lot of things with parenting is parents, almost to protect their own self-esteem, they don't want their kids to resent them or hate them. And they're like, that's why I don't want to say no. Or they're like, oh, how can I say no to my kid? I don't want them to starve. And it's like, well, sure, you don't want them to starve, but then at the same time, do you want them to be bad with money? Because then that leads to a bigger issue.
But not only that, they realize then that they don't need to build boundaries, and you have to have boundaries for them. And I think, that no, I knew her roommate. She lived. There was 4 of them in the room, in the dorm. So I knew her roommates would have helped her out. So I mean, she wasn't going to starve.
Right.
But I kept telling her, no, you have to learn to budget your money. And now, even to this day, she knows how to budget her money. So like I said, sometimes those hard no's, it's a lesson. It's a lesson. And, she's aware now. She's more present. She's like, she works in LA. She doesn't work a 9-to-5 job. She works as a makeup artist, so she doesn't get jobs all the time.
Right.
So she's learned that, hey, Mom, I can't just squander my money away. I have to budget out what I need till my next gig, right? So those were things that I was teaching her subconsciously in college. That she has to be present and be aware, not think of just the moment and spend the money, and not saying, hey, let me plan for the future. If I don't get a job in another week, I still have money for food, I still have money for rent, I still have money to pay my bills.
And I think one benefit to being a teacher and a parent is we already have the skills that we can communicate and transfer our knowledge and wisdom in a way that is more clear and understandable. I think sometimes a lot of kids who have to interpret what their parents do and how their parents treat them and what their parents say, when there's too much interpretation going on, that could lead down a bad road or a good road, depending on the kid and their relationship with their parents. But I think as teachers, we can do a pretty good job at educating our kids about other things that you can't really learn in a book.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And in fact, I always think of my students as an extension of my kids, right? So I'm not going to treat them in such a way, again, that mindfulness, right, of how I would treat my kids. I treat them just like my kids. I build those boundaries with them, just like I would my daughter and my son. There's certain boundaries.
Day one, here's the syllabus.
Here's the syllabus.
Here are the rules.
Right. And you follow those guidelines. You don't turn in the work on time. Yes, you're going to have consequences to those actions. So it's the same concept. And, it's, again, not being mean. It's about being mindful. It's about building those boundaries and let them understand, yes, I'm here for you as your professor, but I'm not going to handhold you or give you a grade. One student one time came up to me and he goes, oh, Dr. Rose, I'm not going to turn my work in. Just give me a 0. And then he turns and he goes, oh, and this is not a reflection on you. I says, yeah, your action is not a reflection on me. My reflections are on my wall at home. I says, your reflection is a reflection on you. And it's the same thing I would have told my kids, right? You go out there and do something wrong. It's not a reflection on me. That's a reflection on you. If you have to go to jail, you're going to jail, not me.
That's true.
Right? So it's the same concept when you're teaching. You're trying to get your students to understand that, I'm here for you, but if you don't want to put the work in, that's a reflection on you.
And it's definitely, and there is something to say how your kids turn out does reflect how your parents raised them. Yes. There is some truth to that. I think in the classroom it's a bit different because as teachers, we weren't the ones nurturing them and raising them. Our kids, though, I do think how they turn out does have a reflection on how their nurturing and their environment at home. And I do think parents should have the greatest influence in their kids' lives. And when they don't have that, I think that's when the disciplining and the teaching can be very problematic. So kids who are more influenced by their peers, their friends, they listen to their friends more so than their parents. And then they come home and their friends, have, in order to feel accepted by their group or whatever, they start going along with what their friends do.
Say.
And as parents, we might be thinking, well, we understand what you're going through, but your friends don't understand how that could be problematic, right? And then that's when they want to debate with you, particularly during their adolescent years, and they want to run away from home, or they're like, oh, I'd just rather be with my friends than my parents. And I think one of the most important things to parenting is you have to build that bond and relationship to the point where your kids value you and see you on a level of connection that they don't feel that same influence with their peers.
Right. See, when my son was little, he used to come home. There was this kid in his classroom called Macho. Macho says this, Macho says that. I says, how old is Macho? He says, Macho is 5. I says, Macho doesn't know any more than you do. You're both the same age.
Yeah.
I says, if you need information, you need to talk to an adult. So I've always taught him that, right? Don't listen to your peers, right? Even when he went to high school, he'll come and ask me, Mom, so-and-so said this. Is it true? I'm like, no, right?
Yeah.
Because again, I think as a parent, and you're right, we're molding them. If you don't mold them correctly from the bottom, it's really hard to do it when they reach that mid-level to adulthood, right? And I always told my son, my daughter, I used to tell her, always be a leader, never a follower. I says, because if your friends are going to jump off the bridge, are you going to jump with them? So, it was always be a leader. So my daughter took that to her whole high school, all the way through college. Her friends wanted to go anywhere. She goes, no, I don't want to go, right? She wanted to be the one to build that boundaries with her friends.
That's good.
I didn't have to do it because I kept telling her, be a leader, never a follower. I did the same thing to my sons. Be a leader, never a follower.
And I think a lot of that has to do with building confidence and instilling some sense of self-esteem in them.
Absolutely.
Because when kids know they have that self-esteem and confidence at home, they don't weigh so much of their identity and self-esteem and confidence.
And don't look for acceptance.
Yeah, they're like, I don't need my friends to accept me.
Yes.
I can make a new friend. If they don't like me, sure, I might eat alone at lunch, which sucks. But at the same time, I know, when I go home, I have a strong support system there. Yeah. My parents are my self-esteem. My family, my siblings are my self-esteem.
As long as they believe in me, I don't care. Right. My daughter used to say, Mom, I have a friend, she just wanted to pass through high school with C's. She goes, I don't want to be a C student. Until she went to college and she was a C student. But in high school, she's like, oh, I don't want to be a C student. I'm going to work hard, I'm not going to follow her. That's her. I want to be an A student. So she graduated with honors.
Oh, very nice.
Because again, I always told her, be a leader, never a follower. I didn't want her to fall in that trap.
Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed that interview, please click like, share, and subscribe to support my content. If you have any questions for our guest, please leave them in the comments section or message me on Instagram for a response video and a special shout out to you. Until next time, I'm your host, Rocky Lowe, saying, learn with purpose and live with passion. Stay rational, folks.